So Ruth, you've probably, had the client that comes in and seems to always select a partner that results in them being abandoned over and over again. They always seem to find the partner that's either in a relationship or just coming out of a relationship and therefore isn't really willing to commit, or they've found a partner that needs to travel back and forth as part of their role for work or something like that. And it ends up leaving, the client feeling perpetually abandoned by people. Now, in schema therapy terms, what we call this is schema perpetuation. So, how does schema perpetuation occur? And Jeff Young talks about this idea of coping styles or coping responses that sit under these broad categories of coping styles. And we're going to look at that today in our 7-minute schemas.
Yeah, that's right. So welcome to 7-Minute Schemas. I'm Ruth Holt, and Rita, Younan and I are both advanced level schema therapists, supervisor trainers. And today we're looking at how do we cope with schemas? What are the three really broad ways that people can cope with schemas? And they fall in schema therapy under freeze, fight, and flight. And that's pretty common, isn't it? That idea that if something bad happened to us, our body would really automatically take over and either run from that bad thing or freeze and sort of submit, or fight. And in schema therapy, we think about freeze really as about submitting. It's about submitting to the schema, feeling quite captive to our schemas, feeling like it's really, I'm stuck in my sense of failure or my sense of abandonment.
Yeah, so submit's kind of one of those, or freeze, you and I like to talk about it as kind of being a submit to the schema. It's one of those kind of tricky ones, I think, theoretically, but really it's kind of this idea that I just rock around the world and I am a failure. I don't try and avoid or overcompensate for it. It just is I am. And so therefore, a lot of the choices that I make or my coping responses end up really reinforcing that schema quite strongly. I feel it acutely. And then what happens is when it's activated under certain conditions where my needs not met, the pain is even more overwhelming and distressing.
And you can feel quite powerless to change in this coping style, that I really am stuck in bad relationships or difficult dynamics or in my head, and I can't do anything to get out of that, which is a bit different to the flight types of coping modes, right? So flight is really about running from, avoiding, kind of really not wanting my scheme to get activated in any way. And at the extreme end of that, I actually might completely immobilize and shut down in a really, maybe even leaving my body or not being aware of time and place. It's a massive amount of avoidance that might not even be conscious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess when it comes to more of an avoidant way of coping, individuals go out of their way to ensure that the schema is not activated. And if there's even an inkling or a felt sense of the schema of defectiveness or shame or failure or social isolation, then they will quickly engage in one of those flight type, avoidant type coping responses to really kind of push that down. And what are some of the ways that, Ruth, you've seen avoidance type of coping responses present in the treatment room with your clients?
Well, for some people, they really struggle to feel their emotions. They might decide they don't want to do emotions. They're like, I don't feel feelings. I don't need feelings. Some people kind of have that really strong sense of they don't think they're running, but there is a way of avoiding their emotions. Other people kind of run to substances or to behaviors that help them avoid their schemas. So they might run to alcohol or pornography, or even just scrolling on your internet for hours is a way of running from something I don't know that I have the skills to face.
Yeah, and it can even come up in, kind of excessive work. So workaholism as well. That's another way of avoiding feelings.
Yeah, and I think our culture encourages people in this type of mode. If as long as we're not doing any damage, we often encourage people to not feel feelings, not feel distress. And as a client, I think it can be hard because if you haven't been given the tools to manage that distress, and all I've got is my avoidance, of course you keep doing that. But as we're saying, then that keeps the schemas alive. Now, this is a bit different, isn't it? If we're thinking about perhaps the fight response, that might be another way of coping with our schemas. What does that look like for you?
So with the fight response, where, Jeff Young talks about this idea that people overcompensate. So they're trying to counterattack the activation of the schema, trying to find almost a plug, as long as I, work really hard, achieve high standards, just focus on performance and achievement, then I'm not going to feel that schema of defectiveness. Or it could be a case of, I'm going to overcompensate and make you feel those feelings rather than feeling them. So lots of externalizing, really. I like to think of flight kind of avoidant behaviors as being somewhat internalizing, and then the overcompensation being kind of more externalizing type of ways of working, of coping.
Yeah, so if I feel defective and I'm in my fight coping mode, I might act perfect. Or if I'm starting to feel really guilty and shamed, I might act in a really blaming way and put that pain and that shame out there. Or if I feel dominated and have been dominated in my life, I might start to dominate other people and really attack others. So, yeah, this is sort of kind of putting the schema out there on others or acting the exact opposite of the schema.
Yeah. And I think it's important, Ruth, just to acknowledge that these ways of coping that, were really adaptive growing up for individuals. So people kind of use these broad categories to the threat of their needs not being met by surrendering, avoiding, overcompensating, because that was really a healthy choice at the time. But as we started this 7-minute scheme, as people become adults, they make similar types of choices, and it keeps them imprisoned within their schemas, that they're different, they don't belong, no one's going to be there to care for them, no one gets them, etc., etc.
That's so true. And we're hoping in the next few videos to help people look at particular individual coping modes and help them with working out what they might want to do with that, and helping therapists have some tools to manage working with those coping modes as well. So that's our 7 minutes, Rita. We look forward to seeing people next time when we talk about avoid and protect a coping mode.